This has been a while, hasn't it? Today's review on Anime Retrospect is Ranma 1/2. This anime series is based on the popular anime which is basically based on the popular manga by Rumiko Takahashi. Ranma 1/2 has been adapted into an anime series, which it was premiered on this day on April 15th, 1989, on this day as well, because this spawned into a series of movies, OVAs, and a live-action TV drama that came out in 2011, as well as some video games as well. Yeah, we'll get to that in good time as well. So, let's talk about the story in Ranma 1/2. So, the story in Ranma 1/2 is about a teenage martial artist boy named Ranma Sawatome and his father, Genma Sawatome, who are not exactly how they went to do for themselves anymore as well. Like, when they find themselves traveling from Japan all the way to beyond Kala mountain range in the Qinghai province of China, which is their training ground in Jusenkyo, right, where those cursed ponds of a animal or a human that has been drowned for more than decades of years. During their training on their martial arts lesson, Genma Sawatome falls into the spring of drowned panda, and he becomes the panda while training in combat in martial arts on those bamboo poles, right where those cursed ponds are. And then Ranma Sawatome has fallen into the spring of drowned girl, which this means Ranma Sawatome becomes a girl form of himself, but with red hair, because that's how they've been cursed by those that are in those cursed springs, which always takes the form, and it affects them for the rest of their lives, which is forever. Especially of how this happened. When they went back into Japan, because, when Genma Sawatome, who is still in his panda form, using any variety of signs when he has no ability to speak as well. It's when Ranma Sawatome in his girl form always wanted to figure out about her modesty, especially of how particularly how it goes. While they're back in Japan, Genma Sawatome's fellow martial arts student named Son Tendo was waiting for Genma Sawatome to return, because he basically always wanted to have the arranged marriages, especially for the children, especially the three daughters. One named Kasumi Tendo, who is the sweet and more kind. The second, Nabiki Tendo, who is a borderline sociopathic, capitalist, greedy person. And the third is Akane Tendo, who is the hot-tempered, man-hating, tomboy, powerful martial artist herself, who always has the same age as Ranma Sawatome, especially when it comes to the marriage of especially when these types of decisions come. When Ranma, along with his father, went to the Tendo dojo, if any of how this prospect of how this goes, particularly, Akane Tendo wanted to invite Ranma Sawatome, who is still in the girl form, to the martial arts for some fun, but after they finished learning their martial arts lesson, they wanted to take a bath and all, but the hot water turns Ranma back into the boy form, and it was very awkward situation, which is almost really weird, almost not in a good way, basically. So this basically of how this happened to Ranma and his father, of what they did back in the in Jusenkyo, about how the curse has got to them. It's like, how do they do this particularly? Well, Ranma, when the girl form, always, well, for his father, still in the panda form, especially of how, now that you wanted to know, basically, when it comes to how this happened, and it's like your own finding its own way to figure it, like, it's more different than finding a needle in a haystack, as how you could know for this how it happens. For the most part, for the reason of how, despite Ranma Sawatome in the girl form, as how this particularly wanted to, who still does martial arts, particularly, Ranma thinks women are weak and silly, but when he always wanted to have masculinity things, of how, especially of how, what this considered the fact of how, of what he basically has indeed, as how, if he wanted to know the engagement of how, if he could have picked one of the Tendo sisters to be the perfect for Ranma's fiancé, of how the decisions made, if he only wanted to have, especially of how this all, of course, being coming the typical things of how you would expect if it wasn't for Ranma or Akane Tendo, especially because she is never interested in Ranma, because she is not Ranma's type as well. Despite how he's basically, she thought it was a pervert in the bathroom in the Tendo dojo. In its own little satire. Well, there is a little, I know this has some martial arts, but there's some romance and some little bit of comedy than most sitcoms out there. Despite how these characters of how its own personalities and every types of situations involving with cold water in a hot and cold situation, of how this particularly wanted to go. Oh, as well. It's given in the fact of how, to explain what it is of how this happened in Ranma 1/2. Because this capsulate only 7 seasons, 161 episodes, between April 15th, 1989, until September 25th, 1992, the same year as Sailor Moon, particularly. So I think this basically considered how, almost filler. However, the series, like for Ranma 1/2, if there's anything special, if any episodes is filler in its own kind. Well, some is basically adapted from chapters of the manga, though, except for other ones that have never been added in the manga, like Ryoga goes to the farmer's place one. It was never added in the manga. Same with the Christmas episode, A Christmas Without Ranma. Those are the only 2 episodes that are never added in the original source material for the manga. If any scenario and any characters of a certain kind, which is more different as how what Rumiko Takahashi had a lot to do, especially for almost in the manga, which has gotten to a point of how it's the thinking of how you would expect, how it has been and adapted from every chapters. Shit, this is basically how its own little situation, despite how it's been adapted from a 38-volume manga as well, of how its own Kickstarters as well. How is it possible? Well, that's a good questionable thing, is how any martial arts manga than any other ones of its, like the other ones particular. There's always some battles, and like imagine Takahashi having he wanted to have any ideas like a gymnastic martial arts, especially the rival between not only you had the fiance harem as well, like you have Kodachi Kuno added in the who is basically Tatoaki Kuno's sister in that one, is in this series particularly as well. Especially of how this goes, and also anything of how involves in the battle in what you see in Ranma 1/2, like such as the ice skating rinks, as well as martial art in a circus, any martial arts, especially in the circus tent, and any other things that something that is going on, especially quote unquote of how any martial arts competition, especially of how this revolves, of how in its own certain ways, of how the whole gender bending thing going on, especially of how many different or and as well as the awkward situations you have so let's have the characters that are introduced in the manga. You have Tadawaki Kuno, who is an upperclassman of Ranma and Akane in high school. When Ranma show up, Tadawaki Kuno is the tough guy who is always lying in the kendo when he's learned to use the sword. He's basically wanted the hots for Akane Tendo, in fact, but instead, she has physically how she can beat off the others just before they get in time for school, especially to fight off the others for those of how those who want to defeat her gets the first date, especially of how when Ranma Sawatome encounters Tadawaki Kuno. When Ranma in the female form, Tadawaki Kuno always calls her as the pigtail girl, especially for the affection as how this comes to the thing. As well as Kuno's sister, Kodachi Kuno, who falls in love with Ranma, especially in the male form, despite how she reveals of how this basically is in its own certain way, as how this goes as the rival lovers going. Speaking of which, there are some rival lovers than the others of how this what you see in that. The most important things about what is about Ranma 1/2 is that this is more different from different types of sitcoms out there. Especially there's almost every character in the series basically it's more compared to the other characters of how it's basically how, especially for how this goes, as even though the series has been run from 38 volumes of the original manga source material, every wild circumstances of how something is going on in Ranma 1/2, especially about the other engagement. Well, there's other ones particularly. There's more characters that are included. Speaking of which, you have Ryoga, who is deeply flawed, who is the person of his own personality, of how he wanted to search for going from places to place, but he ends up getting lost. Especially of how he wants to challenge to fight with Ranma when he wanted to do something particularly, as how he wanted to go from the all-boys school, of how there is a long story when of how he remembers Ranma when and the lacks of orientation when he goes from Okinawa, but he ended up being in Hokkaido, in the parts of area in Japan, when he wanted to. So he noticed something from what's going on. He ends up falling into the cursed spring of drowned piglet. So it made him become a little black piglet. So it goes by the name P-chan in that one. As how... Then you have the other characters, such as Moose. Yes, that guy who is basically with the bad eyesight, who wears the glasses, basically. He thinks he always wanted to be in love with Shampoo as well. He wanted to battle against Ranma, but he ends up falls into the spring of drowned duck. So that means Moose becomes a duck as well. For any, unlike P-chan, the duck's name goes by Mumu-chan as well. Particularly, you had, because the characters Ryoga and Moose are the only two that fall into the spring of drowned animals, where Ryoga becomes the little black piglet when he got splashed with cold water. Same with Moose, splashed with cold water, he becomes a duck. Which, you get the point, though. Not only you have the characters on these rivals, yes, now you mentioned Shampoo earlier. She is a Chinese Amazon who was always got the hots for Ranma in male form, but she wants to kill the female Ranma when Ranma is in the girl form. While Genma Sawatome and Ranma were in China, they saw something in the martial arts tournament in the wilderness of how they wanted to steal and eat the main prize, of which is the food, which Shampoo wanted to win the grand prize. So it sets her off, so she challenges the battle between female Ranma. So Ranma, in the female form, defeated Shampoo in the battle, so she receives Ranma the kiss of death, as what she wanted to hunt down and murder Ranma, who is still in the girl form as well. Especially, they were everywhere in China, and now she has found Ranma Sawatome in Japan as well. Especially of how this goes in there. When Ranma tracks, so that's how basically how Ranma finds out that Shampoo has tracked him down in Japan. Especially when Shampoo sees Ranma in the the male form, she receives the kiss engagement, so she falls in love with Ranma. So that basically so that made Akane jealous, basically. So this is basically similar how it happens between both couples in every other anime in general. Every type of form of relationships of how this goes. Yeah, two or less of how any credibility results as well. As how the recommendability as well of its own either way. Honestly, though, this basically how it's given in the fact as well. When Shampoo returns to China, she's not only the only part of the girl in Ranma one half. You also have Ukyo Kuwanji, who is an okonomiyaki chef, who is Ranma's childhood friend. When she knows Ranma, back then, Ukyo and Ranma were children. Genma Sawatome and Ukyo's father made an agreement for Ranma and Ukyo to be perfect, especially for the Kuwanji food card. But Ranma likes the taste of okonomiyaki instead of the relationship for Ukyo, basically. So that means that Genma Sawatome has stolen the food card with the okonomiyaki. So that made Ukyo traumatized, which she gave up on the femininity. So she dressed up as a guy in a school uniform, especially so she could hides her female form self. More different than Ryunosuke from Urusei Yatsura, but this is more different than the other as well. However, Shampoo has came back in Japan, this time with her ghoulish old grandmother, Cologne, who was an expert Chinese Amazon martial artist. During the training in martial arts, art in Jusenkyo, however, or this goes on happening. They're in China. She falls in the spring of drown on cat, so Shampoo becomes the cat, especially. You guessed it. These characters fall in the spring of drowned animals. That's the good question, though. So when Shampoo is a cat, it reveals Ranma's fear of cats, which is ailurophobia, because he has a bad fear of cats. Yeah, other than his own father, basically. When Ranma's father, Genma Saotome, throws Ranma in the pit of starving cats, when Ranma has the biggest fear of cats, something affects him of how he becomes his own mind to act like a cat as well, particularly of something going on in his mind. Yeah, one of these things is not like the other, wasn't it, as well, huh? Speaking of which, this seems to have how, other than, you had, more different than these other her rivals, basically, of how this goes, particularly of how this happened as well. Other than the female rivals of Odachi Kuno, Shampoo, and Ukioka Wanji, this things has not gone pretty good far as well among the harem of the girls, basically. But clearly Ranma always has wanted to know something, what he had a lot to do, basically, for its own vast majority of how, for newcomers as well. As you have Ranma Saotome's mother in that one, which I think she appears in the final season of Ranma 1/2, which I think this was season 7, basically, of how any masculine things of how when Ranma how is your typical male martial artist pours himself a bucket of water, which made him turn into a girl of its own certain maze of well, as something goes, as particularly of how I know there's some martial arts on it, but I know it has its moments as well, particularly skilled in as well in its own little source material of how. And also, you have other characters. You have Happosai. You heard me right. Happosai is a perverted, who's an old geezer character, stealing women's underwear, as including Akane's underwear as well. Yeah, because Happosai is one of those perverted, old, like, dirty old man stealing women's underwear. Kind of like Master Roshi in Dragon Ball series as well. I mean, this is basically, except that Ranma has to wait, especially when Ranma in the female form, after splash with cold water, Happosai wanted to steal if Ranma has women's underwear, but Ranma in the female form hits Happosai right in the head with her fist as well, particularly. Because you know what she has been doing as well, hasn't it? Speaking of which, Ranma 1/2, however, I know that there is basically how there's some characters in there. You have other minor characters on here. You have Pantyhose Taro, which I think he appears in, I believe, season 6 of Ranma 1/2 as well. Quite frankly, though, as how this particularly wanted to go as well. I mean, the story was good, and it's very well written as well. Probably very more faithful to the original manga, though. Including some episodes that were never added in the manga, like the Christmas episode, which is A Christmas Without Ranma, which I believe it's in season 6 as well, quite frankly as well, come to think of it, for the own way as well. It's something of how Rumiko Takahashi had a lot to do for this one as well. And the characters, we all know that they were introduced as well, particularly as well, which you get the point though as well. And the music on here, it's very good though, a little like oriental like music. Like if you listen to the soundtrack of Ranma 1/2, if you're watching the anime on there, especially like Ranma versus fighting with Moose in the episode Ranma versus Moose, to lose is to win, which I believe it's in season 2 of this anime as well. And also that this is the only thing as how as well as how this guy has gotten to the thing as well. The production on there, it looks very well good as well. I mean, I love the anime art style of the Ranma 1/2 series. Although I love the manga art style of the original manga though, but the anime one, I thought it was pretty good. Like, you have to feel free to be in the mood for it as well. And my overall enjoyment, if you have never seen Ranma 1/2, give it a watch. I highly recommend you this anime, which is part of your anime recommendations as well. If you watch it for free on Tubi, or if you have it on DVD or Blu-ray, especially if you're going to binge watch on something as well, if you can watch it for over and over again as well. My score for this anime, a 10 out of 10. That's right, 10 out of 10, because I love this anime series as well. And yeah, this basically of how this got to a point though I had to cover this anime as well. Well, because in the end, there's always wanted to have some, if there is basically how, if Ranma and Akane were married, which was never added in the anime series, if it was for the original manga, especially for the final volume of the original manga, which was published in 1996 as well. Yeah, because this has gotten to this point, hasn't it? For how the creator Rumiko Takahashi has only dreamed of what she's been working on her famous works of what she was doing, like that'll stand the test of time. She's done this like every ounce of her notable works of either of these titles to less than the satisfactory results for her credibility as well. So that's going to be it for my review on my redo review of Ranma 1/2 for today on Anime Retrospect for today, you guys. Thank you for watching, but before we go, here's what I have to say for this one. This is the first time I want to cover this one here on Anime Retrospect, which is something that I haven't thought of doing before, which I haven't done until now as well. Hope you subscribe for content. My anime plan link in the description down below. You can share this video on your Twitter, Facebook, if you have a Twitter, Facebook account, all social media. Smack the like button if you enjoy this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below about Ranma 1/2. What do you think of it? Because I consider this to be my favorite anime as well. And also, if you want to check out my Anime Planet, the link will be in the description down below. Be sure to click on the subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, feel free to click on the subscribe button. Smack the notifications bell button. Be sure to get notified also as well for more latest updates on here, because I have some more coming up as well. And keep it otaku for this redo review of Ranma 1/2, because this is the first time I get to cover this anime as well. For the very first time. This is RuRoni-K95 saying thank you for watching my video. I'm glad you liked it. I hope you enjoy it. Hope to see you soon for the next video. Hope you have a great day. Until next time, I will cover something and what I got in mind. Until next time.